Tangut is an ancient northeastern Tibeto-Burman language once spoken in the Western Xia, also known as the Tangut Empire. It is classified by some linguists as a Qiangic language, which includes the Northern and Southern Qiang languages and the Rgyalrong languages, among others. Tangut was one of the official languages of the Western Xia, which was founded by the Tangut people and obtained its independence from the Song dynasty at the beginning of the 11th century. The Western Xia were annihilated when Genghis Khan invaded in 1226. The Tangut language has its own script, the Tangut script. The latest known text written in the Tangut language, the Tangut Dharani Pillars, dates to 1502, suggesting that the language was still in use nearly 300 years after the destruction of the Tangut Empire. Rediscovery. Modern research into the Tangut languages began in the early 20th century when G. Maurice first acquired a copy of the Tangut Lotus Sutra, which had been partially investigated by some unknown Chinese scholar. The majority of extant Tangut texts were excavated at Karakatu in 1909 by Pyotr Kozlov, and the script was identified as that of the Tangut state of Xia. Such scholars as Alexey Ivanovich Ivanov, Shihamajuntero, Berthold Laufer, Luo Fuchang, Luo Fusheng, and Wang Jingru have contributed to research on the Tangut language. The most significant contribution was made by the Russian scholar Nikolai Alexandrovich Nevsky, who compiled the first Tangut dictionary and reconstructed the meaning of a number of Tangut grammatical particles, thus making it possible to actually read and understand Tangut texts. His scholarly achievements were published posthumously in 1960 under the title Tangutskaya Philologia, and the scholar was eventually awarded the Soviet Lenin Prize for his work. The understanding of the Tangut language is far from perfect. Although certain aspects of the morphology and grammar are understood, the syntactic structure of Tangut remains largely unexplored. The Karakatu documents are at present preserved in the Institute of Oriental Manuscripts of the Russian Academy of Sciences in St. Petersburg. These fortunately survived the siege of Leningrad, but a number of manuscripts in the possession of Nevsky at the time of his arrest by the NKVD in 1937 went missing and were only returned, under mysterious circumstances, to the Institute of Oriental Manuscripts in October 1991. The collections amount to about 10,000 volumes, of mostly Buddhist texts, law codes and legal documents dating from mid-11th up to early 13th centuries. Among the Buddhist texts, a number of unique compilations, not known either in Chinese or in Tibetan versions, were recently discovered. Furthermore, the Buddhist canon, the Chinese classics, and a great number of indigenous texts written in Tangut have been preserved. These other major Tangut collections, though much smaller in size, belong to the British Library, the National Library in Beijing, the Library of Beijing University and other libraries. Reconstruction. The connection between the writing and the pronunciation of the Tangut language is even more tenuous than that between Chinese writing and the modern Chinese varieties. Thus, although in Chinese more than 90% of the characters possess a phonetic element, this proportion is limited to about 10% in Tangut according to Sofronov. The reconstruction of Tangut pronunciation must resort to other sources. The discovery of the Pearl in the Palm, a Tangut Chinese bilingual glossary, permitted Ivanov and Laufer to propose initial reconstructions and to undertake the comparative study of Tangut. This glossary in effect indicates the pronunciation of each Tangut character with one or several Chinese characters, and inversely each Chinese character with one or more Tangut characters. The second source is the corpus of Tibetan transcriptions of Tangut. These data were studied for the first time by Nevsky. Nonetheless, these two sources were not in themselves sufficient for a systematic reconstruction of Tangut. In effect, these transcriptions were not written with the intention of representing with precision the pronunciation of Tangut, but instead simply to help foreigners to pronounce and memorize the words of one language with the words of another which they could understand. The third source, which constitutes the basis of the modern reconstructions, consists of monolingual Tangut dictionaries, the Wenhai, 2 editions of the Tongyin, the Wenhai Zeli, and an untitled dictionary. The record of the pronunciation in these dictionaries is made using the principle of Fanqi, borrowed from the Chinese lexicographic tradition. Although these dictionaries may differ on small details, they all adopt the same system of 105 rhymes. A certain number of rhymes are in complementary distribution with respect to the place of articulation of the initials e.g., rhymes 10 and 11 are rhymes 36 and 37, which shows that the scholars who composed these dictionaries had made a very precise phonological analysis of the language. In distinction to the transcription in foreign languages, the Tangut Fanqi makes distinctions among the rhymes in a systematic and very precise manner. Due to the Fanqi, we now have a good understanding of the phonological categories of the language. Nonetheless, it is necessary to compare the phonological system of the dictionaries with the other sources in order to fill in the categories with a phonetic value. N.A. Nevsky reconstructed Tangut grammar and provided the first Tangut Chinese-English-Russian dictionary, which together with the collection of his papers was published posthumously in 1960 under the title Tangut Philology. Later, substantial contribution to the research of Tangut language was done by Tatsuo Nishida, Ksenia Keping, Gonghe Wangcheng, M.V. Sofronov and Li Fanwen. Mark Miyake has published on Tangut phonology and diachronics. There are 4 Tangut dictionaries available, the one composed by Anna Nevsky, one composed by Nishida, one composed by Li Fanwen, and one composed by Yevgeny Kichinov. There is growing a school of Tangut studies in China. Leading scholars include Shi Jinbo, Li Fanwen, Nie Hongyin, Bai Bin in mainland China, and Gonghe Wangcheng and Lin Yingjin in Taiwan. In other countries, leading scholars in the field include Yevgeny Kichinov and his student K.J. Solonin in Russia, Nishida Tatsuo and Shintaro Arakawa in Japan, and Ruth W. Dunnell in the United States. Phonology. The Tangut syllable has a CV structure and carries one of 2 distinctive tones, flat or rising. Following the tradition of Chinese phonological analysis, the Tangut syllable is divided into initial and rhyme consonants. The consonants are divided into the following categories. The rhyme books distinguish 105 rhyme classes. These are in turn classified in several ways by grade, type, and class. Tangut rhymes occur in 3 types. These are seen in the tradition of Nishida, followed by both Arakawa and Gong as normal tense and retroflex. Gong leaves normal vowels unmarked, places a dot under tense vowels, and an R after retroflex vowels. Arakawa differs only by indicating tense vowels with a final Q. The rhyme books distinguish 4 vowel grades. In early phonetic reconstructions all 4 were separately accounted for, but it has since been realized that grades 3 and 4 are in complementary distribution depending on the initial. Consequently, the reconstructions of Arakawa and Gong do not account for this distinction. Gong represents these 3 grades as V, IV, and JV. Arakawa accounts for them as V, IV, and V. In general, a rhyme class corresponds to the set of all rhymes under the same rhyme type which have the same main vowel. Gong further posits phonemic vowel length. The evidence he points to indicates that Tangut had a distinction that Chinese lacked, but does not include positive evidence that this distinction was vowel length. Consequently, other researchers have remained skeptical. Vowels. Merk reconstructs the vowels differently. In his reconstruction, the 95 vowels of Tangut formed from a 6-vowel system in pre-Tangut due to processes of pre-initial loss.